Reading should be fun, and it so often isn't. In this video, I'm going to give you a few recommendations for books that are actually fun to read. They're great and also fun to read. If you get something out of this video, I would really appreciate it if you would leave it a like. I probably look terrible today, but I feel great. I was sick for the last week or so. Only this morning did I get over the cold finally. I think it might have actually been COVID, which is a bummer. When you're sick, everything is awful. Even stuff that we actually love when we're sick just doesn't feel like much of anything. And so today I do really have a good, fresh perspective on life and the things that I enjoy doing. And it dawned on me that fiction only really works when it's fun. It's so easy to get very serious, too serious about your reading habit, and I am very guilty of that. A lot of the authors whose work I enjoy has a really bleak bent to it. But I can also guarantee that those writers were having a hell of a lot of fun while they were writing the stories. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Most of us enjoyed the Harry Potter books when we were younger, and I learned to look for particularly fun moments on the page when there was dialogue. I distinctly remember when I was a kid skipping over lots of the longer paragraphs because they looked boring, but when Fred and George Weasley started talking again, that would look fun. So I would skip ahead to that. And that trained how I read, so much so that some of my favorite writers to this day, like Dennis Johnson and Cormac McCarthy, are exceptional at writing dialogue. That's still where I look for a lot of the most fun parts of the book. Basically, what we're doing when we're reading is playing. It might not look like it, it usually doesn't, but that's what's happening. To create anything requires imagination, and that's fundamentally playful. I promised I would give you some examples of books that are particularly great and also very fun to read, and I'm gonna start with one that sounds like it might be pretty dull. Don Quixote. Don Quixote is the first modern novel, and if you've read it, if you've read part of it, you'll know how fundamentally silly the entire book is. The main character has an imagination that I guarantee you is bigger than ours put together. He's personifying windmills to the extent that he's starting to try to fight them. And if you think about some of the other great works of literature, Shakespeare's plays, they're literally plays. If you're lucky enough to be able to see one of the plays performed live, even the dramas have some silly elements to them. Most of them do. You might not have as much fun reading Don Quixote as people did like 500 years ago, but I promise you, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you pick it up and read at least a few pages, you can definitely at least have a good perspective on like, oh, okay, hundreds of years ago, this would have been so novel and fun and new that it would have been really engaging. Another great older novel that I think displays how important fun is to reading and writing fiction is actually Moby Dick. And this is a book that is famously dry in stretches. If you give it a shot, you'll feel that playful energy. You might not be motivated enough to finish Moby Dick, but I guarantee you'll see what was in it for readers at the time that it was published. As with a lot of great novels, it takes a little bit more effort to have more of an appreciation for them the further away we get from the date when they were actually published. And this is natural. It's why I often make a distinction between the greatest and best novels that I've read and the ones that are my favorite and that I liked the most. Ideally, you will find a little spark of silliness in you, go about your day, and get into a good book that brings you joy. That's what I would like to have happen as a result of you watching this video. I'll give you two titles to try. Tree of Smoke by Dennis Johnson, who I mentioned earlier in this video, revolves around characters who are fighting in the Vietnam War, and that probably doesn't sound fun, but it's what they make of the bleak, absurd, and bizarre circumstances, horrifying circumstances they find themselves in, that really gives this book just so much zest and charisma. It moved me to tears, and it also made me laugh out loud. But the main book, the main title that I want to leave you with is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which does a better job than any other novel I've read of illustrating how fundamental play is to love and friendship. And as a result, because Gabrielle Zevin is a very good writer, this novel is unbelievably fun to read. I had heard great things about it. I put off reading it for a long time, and when I finally did, man, let me know of some books you had an unbelievably joyous time reading, and I'll maybe check them out.